Hey guys, welcome back. I have got a really great interview for you today. I'm here with Adam Langdon. He's over in Oakville in Ontario in Canada, another fellow Canadian. I'm excited. Yay! I'm in the US now, but he's there and he used to be there when I was in Canada. Anyways, we have a lot in common. But he unfortunately has been through absolute hell with long COVID, but thankfully has now almost fully recovered, probably 95% of the way there. So stick around to the end of this interview because he has got a lot of really great insights about the recovery process from long COVID. So really looking forward to getting into all of that. So Adam, thank you so much for doing this today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, Raelan. I'm happy to be here.
And just before we dive in, I just want to send a shout out to Dawn. I started a channel membership program recently. So for people watching, you can support the channel for $3 and help keep these interviews and everything going. And for many of the people who do, I'll just say a thank you in the video. So Dawn, thank you for becoming a channel member. I appreciate the support. So yeah, let's get into it. Adam, can you take us back? What happened? How did this all start?
Yeah, well, Raelan, it started back in December of 2022, and I got COVID for the first time at Christmas, basically. And I don't know, I had a really fast-paced lifestyle back then, like a lot of us long haulers do. Gym 5 days a week, work 50 hours a week in a small family. So, full press all the time. And the COVID kind of knocked me out. I didn't really have a terrible acute infection, and I really didn't know much about long COVID back then. So, I gave my body a day or two to rest like we would with a cold or flu. That obviously wasn't enough. Back to the gym. Bad idea. So hindsight after 18 months of this now, that's probably what caused it, was too much exercise and stress on the body and nervous system too quickly. But about a week after that, things just started to crash down. I just started having all these really weird mental health issues and cognitive issues, I guess. So my long COVID is neurological in nature. So everything to do with the brain went wrong that could go wrong. Depersonalization, derealization, anxiety, panic, depression, loss of emotion, tinnitus, burning brain feeling, head pressure. So it just all kind of came on at once, and I had no idea what was going on. I didn't even know where to look for help. Canada's notorious for having a great healthcare system, but again, doctors didn't even know what was going on back then. This is probably Omicron infection, so not an original long hauler, but pretty damn close. So I guess I went to the doctor and they had no idea what was going on. So, they ran the standard tests and things like that and said, maybe you're having anxiety, or maybe you're having some struggles with depression. And I've had a little bit of anxiety in the past. This was not that. This was constant panic, 6-7 panic attacks a day, adrenaline surges and things like that. And yeah, that's really how it began. So
what were you thinking when all this was happening?
Really, I didn't know what to think. So I've had a couple panic attacks in the past. So that's where my mind initially went. But, I didn't know. I started Googling my symptoms like a lot of us do. Probably not the best idea, but, it led me to Reddit, which led me down a rabbit hole of all sorts of different things that it could be, until I finally landed in the long COVID subreddit, which is a treasure trove of information for long COVID. And I started just putting my symptoms into the search bar, and a lot of things started to come up. A lot of similar stories from men and women across the world who were dealing with the same things and having the same issues, getting answers from their doctors or the medical community. And, I said, maybe this is it. Maybe this is long COVID, because what the heck else could it be? Because I had a completely normal life before this, before Christmas. Everything was great, normal. And it had just completely upended my life and changed who I was as a person. And I didn't even know that could happen, from a virus. It's absolutely crazy to think about.
So when you started reading about long COVID in some of these forums, what were people saying?
So there was a lot of people with similar things, right? So the burning brain feeling and the brain pressure, the constant panic attacks. And I started to learn there was different subsets of long COVID, I guess, right? That, there's select few who have neurological long COVID. It's a little bit more rare than folks with, issues with their respiratory system, or they're having like heart issues and POTS and things like that. But for me, everything, I had a bit of trouble with my heart and no trouble breathing, but everything came down to neurological long COVID. So it was just kind of filtering through this information. But at the beginning, it was bad because it was like doom scrolling, and just there didn't seem to be that much help back then either, because we were all just trying to figure it out. So I don't know, like 6 months in, I started to see posts from specific users who almost could be the same person as I was, really. And they were doing patient-led research, and they were trialing different medications and different treatment protocols, doing different work. And that's when it started to click that if I'm going to get better, I need to start doing this myself. I need to take charge of my health, and nobody else is coming to save me. So it's time to get on board here and start trying anything and everything I could.
I know that initially, understandably, it all felt terrifying and probably quite hopeless when talking to other people who are facing this. But I'm curious, as time goes on, is there a shift in the long COVID community with people from sort of a hopelessness to a more hopeful understanding of the prognosis of this?
Yeah, I think you have to kind of filter through what you're going through, right? In terms of what you're reading. And it doesn't just apply to Reddit. There's groups on Facebook as well that I'm part of, some that I moderate, and you have to filter through. And I finally read something that was like, you got to stop reading the terrible stuff and start reading the recovery stories, which is what led me to your channel as well. But there's now a subreddit about just recovery stories, so it was migrating, spending more time there instead of on the long COVID group on Reddit, I guess. And then finding other groups on Facebook, for example. I'd say one of the best groups I found was about fasting, and specifically done by Tom Bunker. You've probably heard of him for long COVID, but made his own protocol, again, patient-led research that's now in clinical trials, fasting for long COVID. So finding more positive things, I guess, to try rather than reading, oh my God, like I'm dying. And you have to be careful because there are trigger warnings in there too, and people are really sad and depressed, and it's hard. And I was there, and I know that feeling. But in terms of time frame, I mean, there was a certain time, probably about 6-7 months, when things started to click and get better. Very, very slowly. But then at that shift in my recovery, things started to get incrementally better monthly, and maybe, a few percent, up to 5% a month, up to where I am now. So
yeah, someone once told me ages ago in one of these interviews that to always, when you go online, when you're trying to find information, to put the word recovery or full recovery at the end. So don't just Google long COVID recovery or full recovery or chronic fatigue syndrome recovery. It really helps you filter through that, because I think a lot of people in a bad place, understandably, I'm really struggling that it isn't so necessarily helpful to immerse yourself in too much of that, I think, when you're trying to find your way out of it.
Yeah,
I'm curious, from these forums or different places, before you landed on the things that started helping you incrementally get better, were there things that people were recommending or things that you tried that weren't so helpful for you?
Yeah, I mean, I have a whole box of things here. So just to show you here, there's a whole box of all sorts of different things. And honestly, I've maybe put it down to 10% that really works. So there's medications, there's supplements, there's devices, all sorts of different things. But I don't know. I tried everything, really. Everything that everyone's tried. Vitamins, fluvoxamine, antivirals, all sorts of different things to try and see if it helps. And one of the issues with trialing so many things, you have to, space them out a bit. But still, it's hard when you're in that place and you're that hard done by to figure out, is this actually helping? What is helping the most? So it was tough, but honestly, there was probably a few things that we can maybe talk about at the end that helped me the most, and we can filter through a lot of that bin so people don't have to try it themselves. But it's true that it really, what I say in some of my videos is, you have to try. And I get messages all the time on Reddit and Facebook and comments and things that, will this work for me? I don't know. Nobody knows, right? Until they actually try it for themselves, as long as they speak with their doctor. And again, we're not talking about medical advice here, but, you have to be in charge of your health, and you have to trial things for yourself to see what could work for you.
Yeah, that's really always been the goal with these interviews, is just to put out as much information as possible and then let people do with that what they will, but not to filter it at all. I know some people have channels and they, want to keep it to a certain theme or approach, but a lot of the time I don't even know how the person recovered before I talk to them. Like, they could tell me it's unicorns, and hey, if that's your story, that's your story.
Right.
Like, who am I to say it wasn't unicorns? Like, let's put it out there and let, not that
Absolutely.
anyone's come at me with anything quite that off the wall, but yeah, it is a unique journey for a lot of us. So I think it's important to just hear all these different things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there was a lot of stigma around things too. We won't get into what they were, but I don't think that we should gaslight. We have enough gaslighting in this community as it is, so I don't think we should gaslight each other and just, if something works for someone, I think it definitely should be talked about and, discovered by others and not censored too.
It's challenging because there's definitely a paradigm shift that's happening with health that is empirically based. There's a lot of research behind a lot of this stuff, but a lot of this information hasn't trickled down to our doctors' offices for the most part, largely to society at large. So even if we are using healing strategies and modalities that are scientifically backed, if the world doesn't really know about them, it can kind of sound like voodoo. So I can see how it can be dismissed or not believed, especially when it goes against everything that we've been taught about healing as we grow up.
Right.
And you have this very serious illness and someone's telling you it's going to be, I don't know, brain training or meditation or breathing exercises. And it's like, give me a break. That's not going to fix this, hell that I'm going through. But yeah, it's the open-mindedness.
Absolutely.
The people who recover, that open-mindedness seems to be a key component of it. And trusting your own gut and intuition a bit as well,
Definitely.
Yeah. So you said slowly things started turning around in the beginning incrementally. So what things started that shift for you?
So I think what helped the most was fasting. So I had done diets and, every diet that anybody had talked about on these forums for long COVID. So, the autoimmune protocol, the antihistamine diet, low histamine diet, ketogenic diet. So the next step was fasting. So this gentleman put together this awesome group and he was testing it on himself, and people were starting to respond to this fasting protocol. So it started with intermittent fasting, and then it went on to a 24-hour fast, and then a 72-hour fast, and then a 3-day fast. And that's kind of how I made it work. For me, when I was fasting, I felt amazing. I crashed after. So some people felt terrible when they were fasting, felt a little bit better after. For me, it was a little bit different, where I crashed when I ate. So you had to be careful with what you refeed with, but it was definitely a huge help. But again, at the time I was trying all sorts of different things too, like fluvoxamine for brain inflammation, which led me into a study here in Toronto with the Canadian Mental Health Society, which was PET scans for brain inflammation. So I took part in that. And that came out in June, the studies that they found. That yes, again, we already knew this as long haulers, but brain inflammation now for the medical community has been found in COVID long haulers. So that was a huge part of what I was trying to do last summer as well. So I was looking at the studies and trying to find out what drugs were they using to treat this when this was done, so that's what I could trial now. So that's what led me to fluvoxamine and some other things. But yeah, again, I started meditation and breath work like you had talked about, using apps for tracking my symptoms and tracking the changes in my symptoms daily, logging my emotions. And that's when my emotions started to come back. Even though every day was awful back then, there was increments of awfulness. And that's what helped me so much now, is looking back. If I have a bad day, now I look back on that, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is crazy what kind of a place I was in back then. So definitely like tracking your symptoms and tracking your feelings and how you're doing is super important to recovery. If not for you at that point, definitely as you progress in your recovery.
Were there any apps in particular that you found especially helpful for this?
Yeah, the one that I use is called Dailyo, and it's awesome. There's like 5 different emotions that you can log, and then it has all sorts of different categories of, fitness, what you were doing that day, did you get out in sunlight, and categories where you can tag things so that you can see patterns, and it gives you reports as the, days, months, weeks go on, and you can see what corresponds to bad days, what corresponds to good days, so that you can kind of try and draw conclusions from that. So, and it's not super expensive either. It was like $25 for the year, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's so smart. I love it. I used to try and do this back in the day when I was sick with journals and stuff, and it's really hard to track and notice patterns when you're doing it that way. But now with our, the way we're so tapped into technology, we can have, data-driven recovery now, which I think is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I definitely started with the journals too, and then I found this, and like you said, it's I found myself flipping back and trying to read when I felt like this, what was happening that day, and that's when I found this app, and I think it's super helpful for those suffering with any chronic disease.
Yeah, even just health in general. I use Insight Timer for my meditation, and you just do a quick check-in for your mental state. And I go back and I look at it from when I first started meditating till now, and it's crazy to see the change and how much more stable I am now. And even things like, these aura rings, how it tracks my sleep, my blood oxygen, my heart rate, all these different metrics. And then you get this monthly report, and then I compare it against the things that were going on at that point in the month. And you really start to see what's impacting you and what's not. So I think making use of this sort of technology is really helpful.
Absolutely.
So what else? What else has gotten you to where you are now with your recovery?
So another piece of what I did, we briefly touched on, which was meditation and breath work and things like that. And back in the day, that was definitely on a whole nother planet for me. I thought that was for hippies up north, and that wasn't going to be me. And until I started seeing people who were recovering from this, and they've talked a lot on your channel about, and you've talked about, the polyvagal theory and things like that, and the vagus nerve and stimulating that nerve and calming your nervous system down. So that for me was my worst symptom, was just this nervous system was firing in sympathetic mode at all times, and I couldn't get it to calm down. I couldn't get the parasympathetic nerve to kick in. And so I started doing research and reading what people were doing, and they were doing grounding. Like, really? Like, they're standing outside in their bare feet. Okay, it's the middle of winter, but I'll try this. So I started walking outside on the grass. I started doing my meditations outside, anything that I could do. I got a grounding mat, I got rocks and crystals and all sorts of different things. Anything that you can try to do to help, at that point, I would try anything. So, I started pairing grounding with meditation, and I started with the Calm app, and then I got over to another one that was a little more in depth, that had a full 30-day course of like beginner meditations and learning more about what it actually does for you. So I really love that app. It's escaping me right now, but we can probably. So the app that I use for breath, it's called Breathwrk, and that's amazing. And I can't recommend this one more. So Breathwrk actually has long COVID breathing exercises in it. So a year ago, I found this, and somebody had posted it, and they have 3, one for the morning, one for the afternoon, and one for at night. And it baffled my mind that somebody was actually looking into this. They actually have an app for, breathwork, and there's long COVID breathing sessions in there. So yes, people are starting to open their eyes to this, and the breathing started to help me calm down, and just spending time every day doing these things. And this consumed my life for a year. Like, all this stuff, there was, everything got put to the side. All my hobbies and, exercise and things like that, everything got put on the back burner. I did my job. I did what I could to get through the day at work. And then I came home, did all this stuff, spent a little bit of time with my family, went to bed, and woke up and did it all again. And I hope that when I went to bed one day, I would wake up and this would be gone. But it wasn't like that, but slowly that happened. So.
All right. So I know, Adam, it's a lot. I know you've done a lot of things in the past 18 months, and there have been a few different things that have shown promise. I know we can't probably cover them all, but I know there are a couple other key things that helped you. So what were a couple of those other things?
So there was a few other things. I read a book early on called What the Hell is Long COVID? And this guy, he wrote a book. It was on Amazon, and it was, right at the beginning. So he was a lawyer from the US, and he was very blunt about what COVID was and, what he had done to recover. So he was doing sauna with cold water as well, like afterwards. So I started back to the gym probably August of last year just to go for the sauna. So he was doing infrared sauna. I was just doing the regular sauna, but I built myself up a minute at a time because it is hard for somebody who's struggling. But sauna's been shown to reduce inflammation in the body. And again, brain inflammation, I believe, was at the root cause of my long COVID. So anything that I could do, anything and everything that I could do to reduce this brain inflammation, I was going to do. So definitely the sauna, and then the cold water immersion as well. So, and both of them are pretty intense. So definitely start with, you don't have to start, really intense. Some of these guys do cold plunges and things, but just turn the water a little bit colder each time until you can tolerate cold water for maybe a minute. And I started to see it help my parasympathetic nervous system kick in. And it's a little bit of adrenaline at the start, but it's teaching your body that it can handle this, adrenaline, and it makes it kind of reset. So it was definitely a help for me to do those two things as well.
It's interesting because a lot of the things that have been helpful for you have been helpful for me as well. And a lot of other people that I've talked to also, fasting was massively helpful for me. I was one of those people that felt terrible while doing it, but then always had a step up after. So every time I did it, I came out a little bit stronger, a little bit healthier than I was before. But also the saunas, the cold water, I still do the cold water. I do cold showers every day. I do one ice bath a week. All of these things have been hugely helpful. And I keep hearing it. It's not for everybody, but again and again, in a lot of cases, that these things that we don't typically think about in terms of healing,
right?
Actually,
exactly.
It can do a lot for us.
Yeah, definitely. And they're not just for those sports guys, right? So it's not just for those who are performance athletes. They're for us who are sick as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like what you said about starting gently, because that's how I started. I certainly didn't start with ice baths. It was just, let's do a lukewarm shower for a minute and see how that goes. And then slowly build your way up to what you can manage.
That's great.
So if for people watching, let's say they are newer to long COVID or they haven't yet found anything that's working for them, what would you say to people who are facing this and aren't sure where to go from here?
I would say, hold on. It's quite a roller coaster. It really is. And, I get comments all the time, like I said, from people who are just starting down this path, unfortunately. And, where do I go? Where do I go from here? And the best place to start is just doing your due diligence. And God, it's hard. I couldn't read back in the day. I couldn't, oh my God, even thinking back, like I couldn't put sentences together. I couldn't read. I only could watch nature shows with no music or sounds. It was awful. So I know where these people are, and God, it's hard to try and read things on Reddit and things like that. So that's why even going to YouTube and finding channels like yours where you can find stories from these folks, it was easier for me to digest video information in a more calm fashion than trying to read a lot of text. So definitely get on YouTube and, like you said, search recovery stories and try and find stories that are similar to yours. As we talked about, there's different flavors of long COVID, right? So find one that resonates with you and just try those things, right? And slowly, not everything at once, but try one of the mitigations and see if it works. Give it a week or two. And if it doesn't, move on to something else. But for the things that we talked about that are foundational, like breathwork, meditation, grounding, those things, cold showers, saunas, those things you should be doing all the time, regardless. I'm talking more like supplements, medications, protocols, fasting, but definitely be doing the things that can hurt you as much as possible. And sometimes those are hard too to do and to get into your schedule, or sometimes you may have a flare or relapse from them, but you got to try and see what can help you take active charge in your recovery.
Yeah, for a lot of us, what helps us to get past this is quite simple, but it's not necessarily easy. But for me, it was a lot of fairly simple, cheap things done repeatedly over a long period of time that slowly pulled me out of this. And I think a good place to start for anyone is always with those basics. Can you get some more sunlight? Can you improve your sleep quality? Can you get out in nature a little bit? Can you do a bit of meditation? Can you clean up your diet a little bit?
Exactly.
And just keep building that foundation of health while you explore the other things that are out there.
Definitely the best place to start.
Yeah. So where are you at now with things, with your recovery?
So right now I'm probably 90 to 95% better. So I was reading some of your comments in your most recent videos, and people enjoy one of the stories that you had posted about somebody who was almost recovered. So, that gave me some hope that hopefully this resonates with some people as well, because there are a lot of us, it seems now, that are stuck between like 80 and 100%. And, there's still days when I'm not myself. I'm not the same person I was, 18 months ago. But it seems that I wake up the next morning and the day's a little bit better. And then the day after that's pretty good. So, until that's fully gone, I'm not going to consider myself recovered. I definitely think less about long COVID now. I started making my videos in December, and I was making a lot of them because long COVID was consuming my life. And I found that there's a little bit longer of a stretch now in my videos. And I noticed that in the last one I made, but I think a lot less now about long COVID. But I definitely still have some of the symptoms remaining. So I still have a little bit of the head pressure sometimes, sometimes a little anxiety and the ringing in the ears, but a lot of people are stuck with a few of those symptoms. So hopefully with continued use of these mitigations that we've talked about, over time, things will get better.
So if people wanted to connect with you or learn more, and tell us how they would do that. What's the name of your YouTube channel?
So it's called Beating Long COVID, and that's the YouTube channel that I started. And basically it just talks about my story. That's the video that has the most amount of views, and then I go over a few of the things that we've talked about in more detail, supplements, medications, protocols I used, fasting and things like that. So it's Beating Long COVID on YouTube. That's the channel I have.
Amazing. And as always, all of this is linked in the video description. So I really encourage you to expand that description and take a look, because he's putting out some really great stuff. I'm so grateful to you, Adam, and to everyone who's out there sharing their story and putting out resources for people with all of this information. Because as we said, there are millions and millions of people on the planet who are working their way through this right now. So we really, really desperately need this. So thank you for everything that you do, Adam. Thank you for coming here on the channel and sharing your story here. I really, really appreciate it.
No, thank you, Raelan. Thanks for everything that you do for the community. Everybody appreciates it.
Oh, it's absolutely my honor to do it. And for those of you watching, I know, Adam, you mentioned before that Rob's story was one of the long COVID ones that kind of resonated with you. So I'll link that one up on the screen here if anyone wants to check that out. And a lot of great insight and pearls of wisdom there as well. So thank you to those of you who are watching. Really looking forward to your comments. What has your experience been with long COVID recovery? What's been working for you? Let's just continue to get information out there. Really appreciate your thoughts when you take the time to share them. And sending those of you watching massive hugs. I know this can be a nightmare. Keep going. People are getting better every day. There's so much reason to be hopeful and so many different things that you can try. So please don't give up until you find what works for you. And I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you got something out of it, and I hope to see you in this next one.